Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I'm pleased to be here today as you examine issues related to the financial condition of state unemployment insurance trust funds. The severity of the recent recession has resulted in the worst labor market conditions in the United States since at least the early 1980s and placed a heavy demand on state trust funds. Over the years, GAO has issued reports on multiple aspects of the UI program, including reports dating back to the 1980s that focused on the solvency of state trust funds. My remarks today are based on a report released at this hearing called Unemployment Insurance Trust Funds. Long-standing state financing policies have increased risk of insolvency. Our report discusses three issues. First, the current condition of state trust funds. Second, policies and practices that have contributed to that condition. And third, options for improving UI forward funding in the future. To address these issues, we analyzed statistical data over a 30-year period, reviewed reports by various agencies, and conducted interviews with federal, state officials, and policy experts. In summary, we found that state trust funds are in historically poor condition. As of April 1st, 34 of the state trust funds, now risen to 35, have outstanding loans totaling almost $39 billion from the federal government. This total loan balance increased by almost 50% in just the first 3 months of this year. By comparison, 24 states required loans during the recession of the early 1980s, during which unemployment nationally approached 11%. Aggregate reserves, net of loans, measured about negative $15 billion as of the end of 2009, the lowest level in the program's history. Despite UI tax rates that are expected to rise significantly in many states this year, the Department of Labor projects that aggregate reserves, net of loans, will fall to negative $88 billion at the end of fiscal year 2012 before starting to grow again. Long-standing UI tax policies and practices in many states over 3 decades have eroded trust fund reserves, leaving states in a weak position prior to the recent recession. Further, the average U.S. pre-recession funding levels of state trust funds were lower prior to the recent recession than for each of the previous 3 recessions. While benefits over the last 3 decades have remained largely flat or declined relative to wages, employer tax rates have declined. 2 aspects of that story. First, most state taxable wage bases, the amount of workers' wages on which employers pay UI taxes, have not kept up with increase in wages. As of 2010, only 17 of the state trust funds have taxable wages that are indexed to average wages. The percent of total UI wages that are taxable under states' policies measured about 47% in 1979, but has declined steadily since then to about 27% in 2008. And states not indexing their wage bases account for most of this decline. Second, many employers pay very low tax rates on the state taxable wage basis. From 1997 to 2008, the average minimum tax rates levied on employers by states dropped from 1.14% to 0.37% of taxable wages. Bottom line, when you combine these 2 trends, that UI tax contributions by employers as a percentage of UI covered wages have trended downward in each of the last 3 decades. Our report presents various options for improving the long-term state trust fund financing and discusses the advantages and disadvantages of each option. The option we highlight for congressional consideration is the possibility of raising the FUTA taxable wage base from its current level of $7,000 and indexing this base to average annual wages. The federal taxable wage base has remained at $7,000 per worker per year since 1983. Raising and indexing the federal tax base could induce many states to raise and index their own state taxable wage bases, since states are required to have a taxable wage base at least as high as the federal base in order for their employers to receive full tax credits on the federal taxes they pay. At the same time, we suggest that Congress could consider measures to ameliorate the resulting potential increases in the tax burden on employers, such as lowering the federal statutory tax rate or increasing federal tax credits. In conclusion, the long-term decline of UI funding, culminating in widespread borrowing by state trust funds, raises critical questions about the ability of the program to function as it has in the past. Increased borrowing over time could change the nature of the program's federal-state partnership, with the federal government taking on more chronic funding responsibility for paying benefits rather than providing, as originally envisioned, a backstop to states when they experience financial emergencies. Now is the time to consider changes to federal program policies that could better assure the long-term financial structure of state trust funds. That concludes my statement. I'd be happy to answer any questions.